Alan Sills here. You ever have something that you wanted to share, something you knew was important, and you just wanted to make sure the words came out right? Well, that's how I feel about this right now. I want to share with you some of my summer reading, and one of the books that I've reread this summer is called The 5,000-Year Leap, a miracle that changed the world. And I really like this, Principles of Freedom 101. See, this book is something I chose to pick up this summer because I see what's happening in my country, in our country, and I'm very concerned. So I decided I would turn to the words of the founders and begin to develop a deeper and better understanding of what it was the founders had in mind when they formed this nation in the first place. Now, you might be saying, well, who are you to bring this message out and put it out on a video series on YouTube? Well, I'm not an historian. I'm not a constitutional expert, but I am an educator. I'd like to think that I'm an adequate communicator, and I'm an American, and that's really enough, I would hope. If you want to know a little bit more about me, I'm a full-time RVer. That's my RV behind me. At the moment, I'm making this recording in northern Idaho, coming to you from a state park where I've been a camp host all summer. And I love traveling around. I spend my winters skiing and teaching skiing all winter. I'm a career educator. I've taught over 20 years, earth science and chemistry and a few other subjects. And again, I'm a reader. I'm a voracious reader. I'm a voracious listener. And I believe that we're at a turning point in our nation. So what's in here are 28 principles that the founders built our nation upon that they see, and I would agree, changed the world, or that they hoped would change the world, since they were simply at the beginning of it. And it's at the beginning that I want to start. I want to share with you a passage from the Declaration of Independence in their own word. Now, understand what Declaration of Independence is and was. It was penned in July of 1776. Each of the 56 men who signed it were basically committing treason against the King of England, because at the time we were all subjects of England, our forefathers, or those who were in this nation at this time. And had the revolution not been successful, each of these men had a death mark on their heads. So they write in the second paragraph, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed." These are revolutionary words. And by the way, this is how I'm going to do this video and this video series. I'm going to share something from, in this case, the Declaration of Independence, very soon from the 5,000-Year Leap. And there's also another book that I read recently this summer, The Covenant and the Civil War. There is a precursor to this book called The Covenant. The Covenant was written by Timothy Ballard, phenomenal, fascinating individual, inspiring individual. I've actually had the opportunity to meet him. And I'm going to share with you some words from here, because what the founders wrote in this Declaration of Independence was, from my latest reading, I believe, the vision, the goal, the national why, if you will. The why are we doing this? Why do we need to exist separately as a nation from England, from Great Britain, from the most powerful nation on the planet? And understand that at the time, those living in the colonies, those living in America, had a standard of living that was parallel almost no other in the world. So when they wrote that there are unalienable rights, those given by a creator, that first of all, I believe shows their mindset. And again, I'm going to read some and I'm going to offer commentary, and here's my thoughts. It shows their mindset. It shows that they acknowledge the creator, they acknowledge God. They, in fact, during the course of the Revolutionary War, acknowledged miracle after miracle, which allowed a ragtag, poorly trained army led by George Washington, to beat the most powerful military on the planet of its day. Think about that. They further state life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They could have said life, liberty, and property, pursuit of property. They chose not to do that because they realized at the time that slavery was viewing slaves as property. And they didn't want to do anything that was going to support slavery. Even though they knew they couldn't end it during the Revolutionary time period, they knew that its day would come. And that's where this book fits in. And by the way, if you want, underneath there is a link where you'll be able to access these books from Amazon. I'll try to point you to the best price. And you should also know that I do fund my traveling lifestyle by being an online video entrepreneur. And you will find that from time to time I will make commercial messages, sharing things that I use and believe in personally. Please don't be offended by my including that within some of the videos or all of the videos. And please know that I endorse everything that I recommend to you, and I use everything that I recommend to you. So, where they talk about all men are created equal, again, that was not the prevailing wisdom of the day. Certainly slaves were not thought of as equal. And throughout most of Europe, you had serfs and lords. And believe me, the lords did not think of themselves equal to the serfs. And I don't think most of the serfs thought themselves equal to the lords. So that's another revolutionary idea. So these men set about forming a new nation. And I think the more today we understand what their thought process was, the more we'll be able to address the issues that we face as a nation right now and ensure that the greatest experiment, I believe, ever undertaken by mankind is continued and can rise to even greater success in the future. So let me begin with this. The author of this book is a fellow named Cleon Skousen. He was born in 1913 and he lived until 2006. He wrote the book, or published it, in 1981. So some of the references you're going to hear are from 30 plus years ago, where he talks about what exactly is going on in society, quote unquote, today. I think you'll find that some of his concerns from the late 70s and early 80s have magnified. Let me begin with a piece on the back cover, which inevitably was written by Skousen himself. Discover the 28 principles of freedom our founding fathers said must be understood and perpetuated by every people who desire peace, prosperity, and freedom. Learn how adherence to these beliefs during the past 200 years has brought about more progress than was made in the previous 5,000. He is not arguing that Americans are exceptional in the sense that we're the only ones that made these advancements. He argues, and I believe, that it is the move towards freedom, it is the move towards freeing man's spirit, which I would also argue God, the Almighty, has his own reasons for. It is this move towards freedom that facilitated the advances that we have observed over the last 200 years. Because if you think about it, the world that the founders lived in was not all that different from the world in the time of Jesus and in the time of the Old Testament. Think about how folks heated their homes, how they got light, how they got around and traveled. Things hadn't changed much in several thousand years.
Hey there, and I wanted to take a brief break at this time. Isn't this great stuff with the video series? If you like what you're seeing, please do give me feedback. Leave me feedback either on YouTube or on my blog post. Listen, I want to take a second out and just share with you a product that I found that I think is exceptional. You may have heard of arginine, you may not. Here's the deal. The #1 killer in our society today is heart disease, heart attack, and stroke. 1 out of 3 are going to succumb to heart disease, heart attack, and stroke. And there's a lot of research now showing that arginine, a semi-essential amino acid, is actually capable of reducing the risk. So I did the research and found the best arginine product that I could. That product is called Arginine Infusion. Now, very simple. I'm not going to pitch you on it. I'm going to give you a link where you can get over to take a look at the research on arginine. I want you to pay particular attention to the ingredients that Dr. Louis Ignarro tells us are what need to be in an arginine product, and then compare them to what you see in here, and you'll probably agree with me. So I'll lead you to the research, and then you can click a link which will take you over to an order page for arginine infusion. Thanks much, and you have a great day. Get back over to the video.
Let me begin with the preface, which is, and I'm not going to read you the whole book. Trust me, I'm not going to read you the whole book. But I'm going to read passages that mean a lot to me and may mean a lot to you. And if you want to follow along with me, buy a copy of the book and follow along with me. If you like my commentary, I'd love your feedback. I'd love to hear it. If you're finding this on YouTube and you click the link, which it would be above me or to my side, I would ask that you go over to the post and reply on the post, which is being posted on alansills.com. With that said, the preface opens up the miracle at Philadelphia. Like the framers themselves, many Americans in the early years of the Republic regarded the Constitution as a miracle. Not only did they praise the competence, wisdom, and motivations of those who served in the Federal Convention of 1787, that's when the Constitution was written, but they declared that the formation and adoption of our new system of federal government represented a political achievement unprecedented in human history. They looked upon it, moreover, as an event that was actually influenced and guided and governed by the hand of God. Thus, it is not hard to understand why our founding fathers believed that the Constitution was destined to bless all mankind. I believe that was their view. And that it was incumbent upon their successors, that would be us, to preserve and defend the National Charter of Liberty. These convictions, articulated in the statements quoted below, should move today's Americans to serious reflection and appropriate action during the bicentennial, that would be 1976, and beyond. Written by Andrew M. Allison, he is the author of The Real George Washington. Now, just to reiterate here, when the founders sat down at the Constitutional Convention, they had seen the miracles that had occurred during the Revolutionary War. They knew that God's hand was directly involved in forming this new land. In fact, one could argue they saw it as the new Israel. And there is an argument for that, and I would refer you to Timothy Bauer's books to learn more about that perspective of things. So now, in their own words, let me share with you just a few of the founders as to what they saw happening at that time. From James Wilson, who was a signatory on both the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Sorry for the brain slip there. Governments in general have been the result of force, fraud, and accident. After a period of 6,000 years has elapsed since creation, the United States exhibit to the world the first instance, as far as we can learn, of a nation unattacked by external force, unconvulsed by domestic insurrections, assembling voluntarily, deliberating fully, and deciding calmly concerning that system of government under which they would wish that they and their posterity should live. Think about this. First of all, his comment about 6,000 years since creation. That's based on a literal interpretation of the Bible that I happen to not agree with, that was developed by Archbishop Usher in 1654, where he attempted to figure out exactly how many years there were between Adam and Jesus. And from that, using largely the genealogy written in Deuteronomy, Leviticus, and in Genesis, he established in his mind that Earth was formed October 26th on 4004 BC. Accepting those comments by James Wilson, I take his comment to say that we sat down, we thought about how we should run this government and design it, and designed a government that had never been designed as such before. For example, at the time, the founders evaluated, should we have a king, a totalitarian form of government, socialism, or a representative republic, a democratic republic, as is what we have today. Pardon me, my voice getting a little dry. John Adams. The Constitution is the greatest single effort of national deliberation the world has ever seen. Very succinct, right to the point, and you can see there might be a reason he was our second president. James Madison, often considered the father of the Constitution. The real wonder is that so many difficulties should have been surmounted in the Federal Convention, referring to 1787, and surmounted with a unanimity almost unprecedented, as it must have been unexpected. Madison calls it as he sees it. These were men of vastly different backgrounds, farmers, bankers, and everything in between. You had men from the South who were slave owners. You had men from the North who wanted slavery abolished. Even then, they realized it was a sin. They did realize, however, that that was not an issue they were going to be able to tackle along with founding a new nation. In fact, in the writing of some, they knew that there was a war that was coming, which was going to have to settle the issue once and for all. From George Washington himself, it appears to me little short of a miracle that the delegates from so many different states, which states are also different from each other in their manners, circumstances, and prejudices, should unite in forming a system of national government so little liable to well-founded objections. You know, there's been a homogenization of America. As I travel in my RV across the nation, every town's got a McDonald's, every town's got a Burger King, every town's got, it seems like, a Wells Fargo bank. And there has been a homogenization of this country. There was a time where that wasn't the case. Speaking of Alexander Hamilton, were we? The establishment of a constitution in a time of profound peace by the voluntary consent of the whole people is a prodigy, to the completion of which I look forward with trembling anxiety. Think about that. He wrote it as it was being done. And there are more. There are more and more quotes. So we're going to get a little bit into the book, and I just want to share this. Skousen himself indicates the reason for writing the book is we needed to awaken the population and then educate them on the greatness of our Constitution. Remember, our Constitution, some people say, well, it's over 200 years old, it's outdated, it's a dusty document. Is it? As we go through this study, you may change your perspective if you are one of those doubters. In terms of the miraculous nature of this nation, consider this. The United States represents about 5% of the world's population, but has created more new wealth than all the rest of the world combined. Moreover, during this time period, we have never suffered a famine. In this in spite of the fact that today's famines continue to stalk the world over. Throughout the ages, humans have gone hungry and many have starved, in spite of their fertile land and manpower to work it. The ancient Assyrians, Persians, Egyptians, and Greeks were intelligent people, but in spite of their intelligence, were never able to get enough to eat. The Roman Empire collapsed in famine. For more than 100 years, the United States has been the food basket of the world. He goes on to comment on the amount of contribution that Americans have made, pointing out that even today, in the time of a nation's disaster, people would gather, the United States would gather, and help out that nation. Apologize for any noise in the background. I'm in a campground, and there are work vehicles. Now, Benjamin Franklin, there's an old story of a woman walking up to Franklin after the convention and saying, Mr. Franklin, what have you given us? And he said, I've given you a republic if you can keep it. Well, he meant that in order for a republic to work, you need a good populace and you need an informed populace. So Skousen hypothesizes here, what would Franklin observe if he came back today? What would he say? Well, that's where I'm going to pick up in video 2 and speak with you about that a bit. And again, I'd love your comments, I'd love your thoughts, and thank you for your time. Have a great day.